So we've been in this whole month been talking about focusing and emphasizing on family and friends, and we've challenged you throughout this month to do things strategic, to invite and bring guests in, and be a part of the download and the deposit of what the Lord would have for the word of the house. And today I want to end this month, this fifth Sunday of the month. And I want to talk about singleness. I want to really talk to the single people this morning. And I really want to sort of encourage everybody who finds themselves in single status. And the focus, the strength, the force of this message this morning is the idea that as a single, you are not a second-class consideration. So being single does not make you a second-class consideration. You are not second-class simply because you find yourself single in this hour. So I know you're thinking, oh, man, dude, you've been married 32 years. You know that's how long you've been from being single. So how can you talk to us about singleness? Well, this is great. So I don't have to talk to you from a place of being married for 32 years about singleness, but I knew somebody who knows about singleness, and he's the Apostle Paul in the New Testament, because he was single for a long time, and he had a word for those who had concerns or raised some thought about the idea of what it means to be single. So I'm going to talk to you about, from that advantage point, just listening and having gleaned and learned and followed the Apostle Paul for all of these 30 plus years of ministry, and what he has to say that is timeless when it comes to speaking to all of you who find yourself in a place of singleness, those who are watching us from live stream and such, and those who will be watching us through the Now Network in the future when this message is broadcast. So let's just talk about singleness. And I thought that before I really get into the nuts and bolts and the meat of what I wanted to deliver, I thought that I would want to dismantle what I call the top myths of singleness. So can I just address that with you? What is considered the top myths of singleness? So let me just address that with you. And here's top myth number one. Top myth number one of singleness is something must be wrong if you're still single. Now that's a lie. Hello, somebody. Something must be wrong if you're still single. Look at somebody and say, ain't nothing wrong with being single. Ain't nothing wrong with being single. Something must be wrong if you're still single. That's the top myth number one. That something must be wrong. I have a number of clients that I see in my pastoral counseling ministry who are single and they're struggling with their singleness. And one of the things that I always encourage them regularly is that, listen, there is nothing wrong with you being single. That doesn't mean that there's something that God has cursed you, that you're diseased, or this is indicative of some sin you committed in some previous life, and that God is punishing you because you find yourself at this place where you're still single. Top myth number one about singleness is there something must be wrong if you're still single. That's a myth. Let me give you myth number two, and that is you can't possibly be single and satisfied. That's a myth. That somehow they believe that just because you're single, you can't be satisfied, that you cannot be fulfilled. And that is a myth. You can be single and satisfied, because you take a poll on a married couple, some married couple, a random married couple, not all married couples, because there's a lot of exceptions to every rule. And there'll be married couples who will tell you that they thought that they would be satisfied once they got married, and they will tell you they're still unsatisfied. So it is a myth to believe that marriage is the answer and the fulfillment for your satisfaction. And we'll talk about that in the marriage thing, about what all of that means. But you can't possibly be single and fulfilled or satisfied is a myth. So that's myth number two. So are you with me so far? All right, somebody say that's a myth, right? Say that. All right, so myth number three. Are you taking notes? You single people, you taking notes now? Okay, so here's myth number three. You ready for myth number three? Myth number three is married life is better and more blessed than the single life. Wrong. All right? Myth number three is married life is better and more blessed than the single life. That is wrong. Somebody once said that the singleness and marriage is flies on the same screen, because you got flies on the outside trying to get in, and you got flies on the inside trying to get out, right? So there are single people trying to get into marriage, but there are a lot of married people who are trying to get back to where you are. Right? And some of them are married and act like they where you are. Right? Anybody got married friends who don't act like they married? Yeah, shake your head. You ain't on camera. You good. married life is better and more blessed than the single life. That's myth number 3. How many myths we got so far? 3? Let me give you number 4. Myth number 4 is singleness. Are you listening? Singleness is a cure or a burden you must tolerate until you get married. That's a myth. Singleness is not a curse. And it's not a burden that you got to tolerate till you get married. If you think that being single, you are cursed or it is a burden that you are tolerating, then you've been drinking from the wrong well. This is a myth that singleness is a curse, a burden that you must tolerate until you get married. It is not true. It's not true. Here's number 5 myth. If you're single, you're going to be lonely. Listen, singleness does not equal loneliness. Right? So it's a myth. If you're single, you're going to be lonely. Look, you're not lonely because you're single. And somebody will tell you, well, you must be, you single. You ain't got nobody to go home to at night. Get you a cat and a dog. Hello, somebody. Did I say that right? Yeah. I mean, anyway, singleness doesn't necessarily mean you're lonely. Right? And yeah, so if you're single, you're going to be lonely. That's not true. Somebody said that's not true. All right, here's the next myth. Singleness makes you less healthy. Really? You know, somebody says that if you're single, you're not as healthy as people who are married. That ain't nothing but a lie. Hello? Singleness makes you less healthy, wealthy, and happy than married people. I know single people who got more money than married people. Right? I know single people who are much more healthier than married people. I know some people who are single who are much more happier than married people. So, but I just want you to know that somebody had been floating around the idea that singleness makes you less healthy, wealthy, and happy than married people. Now, how many of you know that's a lie? Yep, that's a lie. Okay, here's another myth. You ready? This is the final myth that I want to deal with. And that is, it's all right. This is a myth. This is a myth. It's all right to be single and sexually active if you find somebody you plan to marry. Come on, somebody. Okay, I ain't going to talk to nobody here. Let me talk to the camera broadcast. It's all right to be single and sexually active if you plan to find somebody you end up or that you plan on marrying. So it's okay. It's all right to be bug wild. Because essentially you're going to get married. Now, you know that's a lie, right? Because the people you end up, you know what end up happening, right? Y'all don't end up getting married. Okay, so that's a myth. How many of you know that's a myth, right? Look at your neighbor and say, it ain't nothing but a myth. That is a myth, right? All right, so those are the top 7 myths that are circulating around in the single community, and they're reproducing this and they're talking about all of this, and so you got single people who are just confused and conflicted and bothered and all this kind of stuff, and then we get it that if you're single, you're part of a church ministry, you always feel like, hey, why am I not focused on, because most churches across the nation, they're always focusing on the married people and the married couples and the marriage stuff and the marriage troubles and the marriage stuff like this, and single people always considered leftovers. What about us? What about what we go through? What about what we struggle with? And so this is the reason why this morning we want to make it clear to you by first dismantling all of these myths about singleness, and that your singleness is not a curse, nor is it a burden. But we hope that you understand that the Apostle Paul, who according to 1 Corinthians chapter 7, addresses the issues about the standard and the status of singleness. So let's just talk about this for a moment in talking about being single and being responsible and what he brings out concerning what's in 1 Corinthians chapter 7. So all of 1 Corinthians chapter 7 is addressed to the context of if you're married or if you're not married. So Paul goes into this place called Corinth, and he begins to build a foundation of faith, and he introduces this person called Jesus, and people respond to the invitation to come to Christ, and then Paul begins to lay the bedrock and the foundation of these principles surrounding this person called Jesus Christ. So essentially what Paul does in this province of Corinth, in the city of Corinth, is he began to disciple them on, now that you've decided to become a follower of Christ, here's what your life should reflect. Here's what it should mimic. Here should it be representative now that you've made this turn in your life. Now that you have essentially confessed and you've repented and you've decided that you're going to be this follower of Christ, What does a follower of Christ look like? And so he deals with in the beginning about some division that happened in the church over whether or not somebody should follow Apollos, or whether somebody should follow Peter, or whether somebody should follow him. And he sort of dismisses that real quick, fast, in a hurry, and makes it clear that it's not a man that we should be elevated, but it is one single Savior that we should elevate. And all of us are just instruments in the hands of that Savior to bring people to a right relationship with the Lord. So he tries to dismantles the division that occurred there, and then he talks about different aspects of how we should govern ourselves in fellowship with each other in the church. And so he gets to 1 Corinthians chapter 7, because essentially what happens is this subject about marriage and singleness comes up. And so if I could just put it in the context for you, it comes in the context like this. They're sending questions to him. They say, you're our father in the faith. You're our father in the ministry. You're the one who is responsible for leading us into this right, relevant relationship with God through the person of Jesus Christ. And what we get the fact that we will be in glory. We get the fact of what salvation and eternity is. We get the fact of what glory and mercy and grace. We get the idea of all of the definitive, deep theological things, Paul, that you have served us while you were discipling us in the time you was here. But we just got some practical questions to ask you. And some practical stuff we want to ask you is, what do I do with this marriage that I got? Now that I'm a believer, now that I'm a follower of Christ, now that I've decided that I want to position myself so that my life is a reflection of my right relationship with God, what should I do about this marriage? And what the idea was floating around was that now that I'm a follower of Christ, I can dismiss myself or divorce myself from the wife or the husband that I have so that I can be free to serve God 100%. So the thing that they were circulating around is that now that I'm a Christian, I don't need to be married to him, nor do I need to be married to her. So does the fact that I'm a Christian give me license to get out of my marriage? That was the issue that they were circling around. And then the other flip side of that is that now that I am now that I find myself a single Christian, that is a single follower of Christ, a single person who's made a definitive decision to make sure that my life is a reflection of God, what do I do in my singleness with regards to marriage? What do I do now? What is God's view about me being single versus me being married? And oh, by the way, the real nitty-gritty of it all that doesn't really get addressed in church is that the two things that Paul would talk about that begins in chapter 6 and then sort of bleeds over in chapter 7 was the idea that, okay, I'm single, I'm a believer, but Paul, I'm single, I'm a believer, but Paul, I'm single, I'm saved now, I am a believer, and I do worship, and I'm continuing in houses, and we're studying the Word, and I am praying, and I do fast. I'm doing all those things, but you never told me what I need to do about these urges I got. Because in some churches they teach you once you get saved, whatever you had before you got saved go away after you get saved, and that's a lie. Look at somebody, say, you're telling the truth. And so they make you, listen, some faith traditions and denominations make you fake like you don't have the issues you had after you got saved. They make you feel like that temptation is not a real valid thing that you will continue to encounter even after you had an altar call experience. That after you come to the altar, that somehow you're going to walk and you will be Mother Teresa. You will be the saint of all saints when you leave that altar. That when you leave there, the one right eye won't go this way and the left eye won't go this way, and that somehow your insides don't turn because you have to. It's like you get saved and everything about you dies. Yeah, oh, thank you. Somebody said, no, it don't. Those are the folks who realize by maturity that you can be honest and still stay saved. Look at somebody and say, stop faking. Stop. You know it's there. Dude, you know you look. Quit tripping. So the idea is that, okay, Paul, here's my dilemma. My dilemma is I want to be saved, but I still got that itch that I like to have scratched, but because I want to reverence and respect God, what do I do with the itch? Right? What do I do with that? Because It's a real thing that happens. And it happens. So the two things that he was presented with is, now that I'm a believer and I want to live right, do I get rid of my spouse? And the other flip side is that now that I'm a believer and I'm going to be a follower of the Lord, and I'm going to take these principles and I'm sort of mold and conform my life to it, as a single person, do I still have the license? Because remember, here's what he's asking. Because remember, when he comes into Corinth is a major seaport in that region. And there are two things that seaport was good at doing: feeding your stomach and feeding your sex drive. So imagine a merchant on a ship that comes into town. He's been out to sea for a long time. What's the two things he wants to have happen when he come to shore? You ain't got to say it, but we know. So he come to shore, and then Corinth doesn't make it any easy. You know why? Because Corinth has this goddess called Aphrodite. Aphrodite is a goddess of fertility. So they built a temple, a sex temple in Corinth. They built a sex temple in Corinth, and then they outfitted it 1,000 prostitutes. So, and then put the Joe's Crab Shack next door. So what? Oh, come on now. Let's work this out now. So they got Joe's Crab Shack. So they got the neon light saying, "Come eat at Joe's," and the other blue light that says, "Is that the red light district here? The blue light special here." So that's exactly what happened. So they present Paul. Apparently, he must not have discipled them in that area, because he was so talking about getting to heaven that he forgot that they got to live on the earth until they get there. So they write back to Paul and say, now remember, if that's the culture, feeding your belly and feeding that urge, that sexual urge, if that's the culture which they were saved out of. That's the culture that they were redeemed out of. But the issue is they were redeemed out of the culture, but because you changed don't mean the culture has changed. So that means that I'm newly saved, but when I go to work, I still got to pass the blue light district and the red light district. And I love Jesus, but I still got to eat. So what I want to know, in light of my salvation, what do I do as a married couple and what do I do as a single person, knowing that I got all this stuff surrounding me? Because the issue then, listen, because before they got saved, how do you think they lived? Any way they wanted to. They lived any way they wanted to, however they wanted to, which meant, brother, if he got hungry, he went to eat, and if he was feeling froggy, he'd go next door. And it was sanctioned by the culture, so nobody would judge him. Nobody gonna judge him. Oh, Fred back in there again. Fred got a frequent flyer card. Fred has a membership. So, Paul preaching Jesus to them. Y'all got to love the Lord. You got to live holy. You got to be righteous. And so we're good, Paul. We're excited. Oh, they get baptized, and they've been baptized, and everybody on fire about serving God, and they come in the church, and they're having great worship services. And said, but nobody told them that what I'm do. And so Paul had to set the record straight. So he sets the record straight in 1 Corinthians chapter 7. He set the record straight. So then he gets down and go down to verse 17. So verse 17 says, But as God has distributed to each one, as the Lord has called each one, so let him walk. So listen to what he says. So essentially, he talks about this idea that whatever status you were found in when you came to Christ, walk in that status until the Lord himself alters or changes that status. So what he means is, if you find yourself single right now, What you should not be doing is seeking to get married, though ain't nothing wrong with it. There's no crime if you're single and you want to get married. What he's intimating in this verse, and he's talking to believers because they wrote and asked him, what do I do with this fact that I've received the Lord in my life? I've decided to follow God. I decided to conform my life and my walk to him. So what do I do with this issue of being single? Do I remain single? Do I get married? What do I do? I'm tossed in between. And what he says is, whatever the status is at the moment that you come to a God consciousness, you ought to celebrate that status until God pricks your heart to make a change. So what he's saying is there's things you can do as a single person you'll never be able to do when you get married. And there are things that married people wish that they could have done when they were single. So he's essentially putting out there on the block, if you find yourself single, don't walk around talking about how much of a burden it is and thinking that it's a curse. He says, marshal and leverage your singleness to your advantage. And so here's a couple of things that I think that comes out when he addresses this issue about, celebrating your singleness and identifying your singleness and all this trust and things like this. Here's where it basically, he identifies singleness with this one word. Write this word down. He identifies singleness with this word, and that's the word satisfaction. So essentially, he desires that you as a single person, that you learn to be satisfied as a single person. He doesn't speak against marriage. He's not anti-marriage, because in the first verses of chapter 7, he talks about, introduces, celebrates, accentuates the idea of a man and a woman being faithful and connected to each other. But he then turns around and says, now, for those of you who are single, if you find yourself in that place, don't walk around so humdrum of the fact that you're not married like your married friends. What he says is, take your singleness and recognize that there's a thing that God wants to do in your life, do through your life, do over your life, favor in your life that cannot happen if you are married. And there's the beauty about being single and walking in the Lord. You don't have to share it with nobody else. Whoop! Okay, so let's talk about this. So, satisfaction. Somebody say satisfaction. All right, so here's the thing. You must believe you can be satisfied. Listen, single people, you must believe that you can be satisfied in order for satisfaction to increase. You must believe that you can be satisfied in order for satisfaction to increase. If you want to increase in satisfaction as a single person, you got to believe you can be satisfied as a single person. Because many singles struggle to be consistently and completely satisfied in their singleness because they don't believe it's possible that I can be single and satisfied. Their personal experience and the experience of others have convinced them that being single and satisfied is a definitive impossibility. But belief is the foundational element of who we are. Faith is the core of who we are. Faith and our belief and our hope and all that Christ has displayed to us is the foundation of who we are. And it all starts, listen, the starting line is what you believe. And if you can believe you can be satisfied, then guess what? It opens the door to greater satisfaction. Mark chapter 9 says everything is possible for those who believe. And so it's important to remember and remind ourselves and others that just because you haven't been satisfied in the past does not mean you cannot be satisfied in the future. Touch your neighbor and say, I know that's right. Amen, somebody. Many singles are convinced that they must be married in this life. But listen, that is not true. God will give you the graces and the opportunities to be a blessing like never before. So you got to recognize this, that, at the end of the day, ironically, you've got to learn to know that if satisfaction is where I am, then satisfaction is where I will be. Okay? So look at somebody and say, get satisfied. Get satisfied. Okay. So let's talk about this. Okay? So we're talking about that. Listen, we may not possess the health or wealth, or we think the opportunities that others may have. But one of the things that he intimates in 1 Corinthians chapter 7 is to learn how to be thankful in your singleness. Because if you learn how to be thankful now, it makes it possible for you to be thankful in other things. So learn to be thankful in your singleness. And so many are convinced that I have nothing to be thankful for. I've been doing this for a long time, and I ain't married yet, and I don't have no kids yet, and I don't have this, and I don't have this, and then guess what? If you put a cup up to the wall of your married people, they be like, I can't do what I want. I always got to check in. I feel like you being my mama and being my dad. It's all the same. Here's the thing. You need to learn to be thankful in whatever status you find yourself in. In fact, it so happened that one of the secret weapons of experiencing joy in the singleness of the Lord is learning how to know that God, it will make you satisfied. That's one of the greatest secret weapons. And the next one is being thankful. True thankfulness for our singleness, in spite of our singleness, is what brings greater satisfaction. Thankfulness causes, watch this. Here's the reason why you want to be thankful. In general, all of us should want to be thankful. But as a single person, here's the reason why you want to be thankful. Because thankfulness, watch this, you got to catch this. Watch this. Hold on, Fernando. You got to catch this. Thankfulness causes a supernatural release of spiritual joy. When you learn how to be thankful, it releases supernatural joy to our spirit. So go ahead and take 30 seconds and show some gratitude. Go ahead, take 30 seconds and just be thankful. Maybe not directly to God, but just show a gratitude, and I guarantee you 2 of y'all got it. If you release thankfulness, it will release a supernatural download of spiritual joy in your spirit. Thankfulness. You know what thankfulness does? It opens the floodgate of satisfaction. It opens a floodgate of satisfaction, and it pours out satisfaction and blessings, listen, that you won't have enough room to be able to keep. Thankfulness opens the floodgate, and we can safely assume that anytime as a single person you're dissatisfied with your singleness, you're probably struggling with thankfulness. Because thankfulness releases you from that agony of, when is my time going to be, and why don't I have nobody? But the more I am thankful, the more I continue to allow God to do what he's doing behind the scenes in my life.